Hope you have pen and paper handy. If not, got a couple moments here, but I am going to go ahead and kick things off. So again, hello everyone, and welcome to the American Family Insurance Dream Bank, where we believe in the transformative power of dreams. My name is Andy Frisky. I'm a senior coordinator here at DreamBank, and on behalf of the entire team, thank you so much for joining us. As we get started, we always like to learn where folks are tuning in from and encourage you to share so in the chat section if you are comfortable. I'm from Madison, Wisconsin, with the sun out shining today. Hopefully, you all have been weathering winter wherever you may be located at, but very excited and optimistic about the warmer weather. Just a couple quick housekeeping notes. I kind of just touched on utilizing the chat. That'll be our friend today. So go ahead and populate any general comments or discourse you have for folks into the chat section. I realize that probably nobody can use them. Let me change some settings here. Okay, let's try that again. So if you're able to go ahead and just share, if you're comfortable in doing so, where you're joining us from. Wyoming, thank you so much. That'll be general discourse, and then Q&A will be for any specific questions you have for Paul, which we'll try to get to as many of those questions as we can. Wonderful. We got some more folks. Texas, Columbia, Georgia. Thank you so much, folks. Love to see just the breadth of where people are tuning in from. So for those of you who maybe have attended our virtual events in the past, welcome back. And for those of you who may be joining us for the first time, would love to just take a few moments and introduce you to DreamBank. So here at American Family Insurance, we believe that communities are stronger and the future is brighter when people are actively pursuing their dreams. And that's why we created DreamBank. It's an inspirational community destination and virtual experience that is dedicated to dreamers everywhere. From our daily event series to immersive signature programs, there's something for every dreamer, and our offerings are designed to help you celebrate the dream journey, to overcome obstacles, and to stay motivated. I'm very excited to welcome back to the DreamBank stage Paul Reeder. So Paul is the Executive Director for the Center of Innovation Strategies at The Ohio State University, chatting about a practical process for launching an idea. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and kick it over to Paul. Paul, take it away.
Thank you so much for having me on this discussion this afternoon. This is certainly an area of study that I'm really fascinated by. Through my work at Ohio State University, I've taught entrepreneurship classes, and I'll get a little bit into my history here in the next slide or so. But I do really appreciate Andy inviting me to come back and do this presentation, because the most important step of this is that you all have leaned in today. You have made a decision to spend an hour of time with me, and I'll do my best to make it a valuable hour of your time to start thinking about, how do I launch an idea? What does entrepreneurship mean? Do I have the aptitude that moves me forward? And so I want us to be thinking about this. Why did you come today? Why is this an important thing for you to start to learn about? And when I break this down, I really want us to be thinking about this as a practical discussion. I think that's really important, that this is not theory. This isn't a professor from university coming and talking about the theory of entrepreneurship. This is a practical guide, and I want it to be that. And when I mentioned this idea of not just process, but of aptitude, because you'll hear too much discussion around the romanticizing of startups and the grind of the entrepreneur. And I want to dispel some of those concerns and just make sure that you know that it's not a horribly difficult process. You just have to commit to want to try that. And I think the first component of that is having this fundamental desire of curiosity. I want to understand why the world acts the way it does. I want to understand what makes people make certain decisions. And that curiosity is the great place for all of us to start. I also think that we can't have this discussion without a discussion of strategy. And you'll see, one is that through this discussion in the next 45 minutes to an hour, I'm overly honest about my thoughts on this. And so these are really, as a disclaimer, purely my thoughts. You're going to talk to a lot of entrepreneurs that have different points of view, but I think you do have to have a strategy. You can't say, "Oh, I only have one version, or I have to stick with Plan A, and there's no Plan B." That's a crazy concept. You should have a strategy for success, and you should make sure that you are diligent about that strategy and identify those problems and opportunities. Um, because I think that that's the way you can ensure some longer term success and sustainability of your business. So I hope that today is really more of an interactive guide that truly is going to let you unlock your creative problem solving ability, most importantly, critical thinking. I think it's really good that you question each of your steps. Um, and I'm a huge believer in the concept of growth mindset, or the ability to learn and adapt and make mistakes and learn from them. So very quickly, I want to talk about my background or my entrepreneurial journey. It's really started a number of years ago. I think probably about 25 or 30 at this point. Uh, and one of the points is, you see this list of companies across the top of this slide, or the different companies that I've started over the years before I came to Ohio State. But the funny thing was, is I really had this personal epiphany when a friend of mine saw one of my earlier stage concepts up on the wall in my office, and they said, "Oh, I think I'd buy one of those." And I think that was a really interesting step, because I had never, to that point, created something with the intent that I would mass produce it and sell it. I'm an industrial designer by background, and so developing these products is really my trade. And when someone said to me, this friend of mine, Bill, who's coincidentally still a friend of mine today, said, "Oh, I'd buy one," that set me on a really unique journey. And that journey started with this decision to spend my own money. Because as many of you have understood, and Andy is included in this, which I hope we get a chance to talk to his about his startup as well. You make a decision to start spending your own money, and that is not something to be taken lightly, because you have to be able to say, I'm going to throw a concept for a business out into the world, and it's very difficult to find someone who wants to spend on your dream. So you have to make that first decision. I think it's also important for the people here to recognize I don't have an MBA. I don't even have a business degree. My degree is in industrial design. I only learned business through the process of running businesses all these years, and reading as much as I can read about startups, and reading as much as I can read about operational organizations and organizational behavior through the process. So don't believe at any level that you have to have a business degree or an MBA. They can be helpful, absolutely, but it doesn't have to be a non-starter for you. I think more importantly, you have to have this reason to believe that you can be successful. You have to have the confidence to commit, because without that confidence, then you're going to turn around and go home as soon as the journey gets hard. I love it when people say things like, those adage that if it was easy, everyone would do it. I think that applies directly to having a startup. If it was easy, everyone would have a startup. So it is hard, and it's hard to find something new that people haven't seen before. And so you have to have the reason to believe that you can be successful, and the confidence in yourself to be able to do that. I also wanted to show an example of this. Is, I think, 25 or 26 patents that I own on various products. Uh, and I show this because I think there's also this narrative that says patents are critical to a successful startup. And whereas they are important to protect the ideas that you have and capture that ownership position, I want to really point out that patents are not an indicator of business success. You see, as I have, watching Shark Tank, that boy, those sharks, their eyes light up when someone says, "This is a patented technology," or I have a patent on this. It's helpful. It's also very expensive to not just capture the patent and then to police the patent and then to enforce the patent. You can almost see a 10x play on that. If it's $20,000 to secure an initial patent, it could be $200,000 to police it, and it could be $2 million if you decide you really want to enforce it, try to take someone to court. So understand that a patent can be helpful in proving ownership, but it's not an indication that you're going to automatically be successful. So we can sort of get that out of the way early. So this is really the meat of the presentation. And I love this term dream. I think that you have to start dreaming of starting your own business, of being a founder, of trying to change the world. Because if you don't have that personal commitment of your dream, it makes it very difficult when the bank wants to secure a mortgage on your home, and you want to be able to make sure that you're on the right path. So this concept of dreaming is important, but you have to have that confidence. And but what you really want are these tools to solve it. Uh, And that's what we're hopefully going to give you a little bit more insight into today. But I can't start without a dream. And I love this picture also. It isn't just this young founder, staring off into space with his dream, but this is a grinder. I love this term grinder, that this is someone who's just sitting there at home that night and he's grinding away on his startup because he has the passion to see that dream come to fruition. I mentioned the word curious before, and you'll hear this word out of my mouth a lot, that I do like the notion of being curious because I think that curiosity allows us as observers to begin to see real opportunities and real problems that can be solved. This graphic behind here with the blue dot on the left and the green dot on the right refers to something we call the fuzzy front end. And that if you start looking for a challenge and you're on the left side with this blue dot, you can certainly go directly from that challenge or that opportunity to a solution. But chances are, if you go in that straight line, that solution is going to be something that's predictable. It's going to be a model that someone else has started and may have been successful at it. But what I prefer is use that curiosity to begin to wander. Let that squiggly path, that fuzzy part of that front end, allow you to explore secondary research, to have conversations with your customers, to spend more time observing and really practicing seeing way those customers work. And then I love the terms ask, test, iterate, and learn, because if you don't do that in the front end, what you're going to do is just be driving towards a known solution. And I would prefer you allow yourself to wander at that front end and be comfortable with ambiguity, because then you're able to really define the parameters of how you are different as a company before you begin to modulate that down to a more direct solution, and that being our green dot. So this concept of being comfortable with that front end of just wandering, that doesn't play necessarily again to the narrative of, oh, you've got to travel fast or you got to break things that you'll often hear used with startup discussions. So I like the idea of being comfortable with wandering at the front end and having a customer focus. And then, as I said, this idea of practice seeing, you can do that, as I expect all of you are doing, because you were practicing seeing, which led you to some sort of a posting that brought you to this conversation today. So you're already starting that process, but I want you to be curious, because curiosity is going to allow you to look beyond what is going to be obvious. I mentioned the idea of growth mindset before, and why I think this is important, because the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset was defined by a researcher named Carol Dweck. If you want to look up more of the work that she did at Stanford, she's an outstanding researcher, obviously has written a number of books related to growth mindset. But I think you need to really think about shifting that mindset. And as you begin to find problems, you have to see a problem as an opportunity. And I will use those words interchangeably, because I like the notion that I might find a particular problem that society has, something as simple as, oh, my socks get wet when it rains outside. That's certainly a problem, but it's also an opportunity to sort out a way that allows you to keep dry socks in the rain, or whatever your solution might be. But it's shifting your mindset from always seeing a problem to seeing a problem as an opportunity. The second point is also very critical: divorcing yourself of your own agenda. I oftentimes hear of people who come to me with a startup idea, and their entire data set is one person, themselves, saying, well, I have a problem with this and I think I can solve it for myself. Well, that's awesome, because then you're going to be the only revenue generating component of your business. I think you need to divorce yourself of that agenda. You have to understand that you are solving the problem for a larger segment of the population. You may be one of that segment, but you can't be the only part of that segment. And I think as you begin to look at this problem to opportunity shift, reframing those observations to really see their potential is also critical. This comes back to that agenda issue, I believe, also, because you can set off on your path with a very specific application. I'm going to solve this problem for this customer. And then the more that you begin to interview those customers and you have conversations with them, and when I say customers, it could be just a potential customer segment, let's call it. And as you begin to find their pain points, I love the term pain point. You'll hear that referred to by a number of people. The concept of finding that pain point is where is the point of, within that activity or the event that happens that causes them not the most physical pain, obviously, although it could be. Uh, the idea that where they have the most stress in order to try to solve that problem, that is going to be that sweet spot of where your business might want to live. But you have to have this mindset that says, I'm listening to other people and I'm going to be open to new ideas and I'm going to be opening to pivoting my idea from what I think it should be to where the market really wants me to be. So this concept of shifting mindset becomes really a critical component for your ability to adapt to ideas and adapt to feedback that you get from your customers. As a designer, I've for a long time professed the concept of design thinking long before our friend Tim Brown from IDEO and Dave Kelly from IDEO coined the phrase design thinking. I do think it's important because design thinking has transferred from being something that designers talked about now something that business people talk about. So I like that so let's break this down. Design thinking is a process for creative problem solving. Absolutely. Design thinking has a human-centered core. If you look at the graphic on the right-hand side, I truly believe that these three elements in this Venn diagram become three equally important legs on the stool. That yes, you have to understand the need of the people, because that to me is where these problems really start if you're taking that approach to a new startup. Understanding the needs of the people, but you also have to understand the viability of the business. If you can say, well, everybody needs to have this widget, but maybe I really don't know how to sell that widget, well, then you've got one weak leg. And then, of course, the technical feasibility, because today so many of our new ideas, in fact, maybe majority of our new ideas are going to be based on some sort of technology. And I'm not saying that you're going to be technology based, even if you open up a cookie shop, right? The cookie shop's going to have some need for technology, and that's going to be important to you, be able to balance that stool and really think about who that customer is and how can you lead to a better product or service by recognizing the value of these three elements. So as you begin to think about and lay out the strategy for your new company, I do think you need to really consider balancing that need of the people, the viability of the business, and the feasibility of the technology being able to deliver what it needs to do in order to make the other elements work. So, as I said, this is a practical approach, and I want us to be continuing to use words and phrases that are very practical to remember and to apply. And this is one that I think is important. Fall in love with the problem. Fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Now you have to think about that statement. Because if you say, yeah, I understand what the problem is, and this solution is awesome because I'm awesome and I've already thought of through every possible solution, and that's the solution that's going to work. Well, it's going to work until someone else comes up with that same solution, or it's going to work until the world changes, or regulation or regulations change, or funding gets discontinued. You have to fall in love with the problem because that's the way that you're always going to build a strong foundation for your startup. So asking why allows you to start to think about the root of that problem. This is what I like. There's common areas of thought that say you have to ask why 5 times. Why is it that people need to get from point A to point B? Why do they need to drive in a vehicle? Why does that vehicle need to have wheels? Why does those wheels need to be able to roll on multiple surfaces? So you can start to break down every problem if you start with this question of why, but you want to find the root of that problem. Because if you don't, like let's say it's right now it's 12 o'clock, no, it's about 12:30 here in uh sunny Columbus, Ohio, and I'm hungry. So if that's my problem is that I'm hungry. But if I had to look at only that trailing indicator of I'm hungry, do I really understand what the actual problem is? The problem is I didn't eat lunch yet for me, but the problem also could have been, oh, I didn't have enough protein at breakfast, or I ate too much last night and I'm still full, or maybe I've got a bug coming on and I'm really not hungry. Well, there are three completely different root problems for what might be the indicator that I'm hungry. And if you use that simple idea, that's a great way to start building yourself back to the root problem. And if you don't understand the root problem that you're trying to solve, and that root problem that you want to fall in love with, then you're going to be following that trailing indicator, which may not be at all an accurate assessment of the problem. So as you begin to really find those, ask why, find those root problems. I love this Mad Lib also because the Mad Lib is the beginning of what I would, consider the proverbial elevator pitch. So we will solve this problem of X for the customer of Y resulting in Z. That's very simple because you can really put any startup into that format. There's a lot of variations on this, which we can build upon that talk about changing of metrics or what the vehicle you are for your product. But I like the simplicity of uh, Uber will solve the problem of moving around an urban city for an urban customer who doesn't want to wait for a cab, resulting in private ride sharing and ride hailing efficiency within a large metropolitan area, right? So you can take any company and break it down into that Mad Lib, and that gives you the foundation that you can begin to validate an idea or validate a solution with someone. But I can't stress the importance enough of knowing where the problem is, falling in love with that problem, and then making sure you're not chasing that trailing indicator. So this might be one of the most important slides in this set. If you want to capture that, capture it, because this is, to me, something that for the last 30 years we have really been focused on. And that are these stages that you need to go through, the stages of what takes an idea from concept to launch. And I've broken this down into two areas because I love this concept of the double diamond, that if you look at that blue diamond, you're going to be expanding your thinking while you were experiencing that fuzzy front end, to consider all options, to look at the root problem. And then as you begin to identify, you've been curious, you've you've looked at that opportunity, you understand customer pain points, you begin to create that problem statement, and now you're down to that pinpoint at the second at that the end of that blue diamond. When you've done customer validation, you've gone out and you've talked to your customer and you've made sure you understand that pain point. But now you're going to expand again into the second green diamond by saying, okay, now I'm going to have a solution ideation. If I truly understand the problem I'm trying to solve, then I'm going to create, like, idea creation, ideation, idea creation. I'll start to potentially solve solutions, but I want you to go back to the customer because it, again, can't be your agenda. You have to listen to that voice of that customer and them to say, oh, yeah, that's a good solution. I would pay for that. That's a solution that I would go search out, that I would follow on Instagram. If you don't have the customer validation, then once again, you're going to blindly spend money without a good indication that somebody's going to actually pay for this. You also then move that into the really getting serious about business modeling. Where am I going to make money? How much is it going to cost me? Who do I need to partnership with? What's the distribution going to look like? Do I want to take this on as a startup, or do I want to build this as a concept that I would license out and sell to someone else? From that business model, you're going to create the strategy, as I mentioned in the first slide. I think you cannot and should not be allowed to proceed with a startup unless you actually can talk about your strategy. You can talk about, here's the plan, here's what's going to happen if my competition changes their strategy and I have to react. Here's what's going to happen if someone approaches me and wants to buy my business. How am I going to find my first customer? How am I going to find my thousandth customer? That's strategy. Um, and it doesn't have to be a complex business model or a business plan, rather, that you never look at. This should be a living document that you're consistently evaluating your strategy as you are executing. So I should probably really change this graphic to be between strategy and execution as a loop, because if you're going to be a successful startup, you have to have that ability to constantly assess where you are. Am I still attracting the same customer, or is my customer going to be different than what I thought they were before? So I think that this concept of these 10 steps can be a really good baseline to follow this double diamond of creating a new idea, knowing that when you get to that business model stage, you get to the strategy stage, that you have a solid foundation and understanding of your customer, understanding of the value of your solution, understand how your solution will actually generate revenue, and then you can execute on that plan. There's some subtleties that I want to throw into this notion right now. When we talk about knowing your customer, one is that you have to understand your customer may be different than your end user. And let me be specific about that. Customer to me refers to who pays for that, right? But it's entirely possible that the end user does not pay for your service, that that's paid for through a third party. I mean, the entire cell phone industry was based on third party pay, where the customer ended up being Verizon and the user was you, and you were getting that product for free by virtue of paying your Verizon bill. And so I think that understanding the difference between customer and end user is important. It's also important to understand you may have multiple customers. In fact, you hope you have multiple customers. But what you don't want is, and I would be cautious to ever say, oh, the entire world is my customer base. Well, that's crazy. The entire world is not your customer base. And if you propose that, any venture capital firm or anyone who you are pitching an idea to will laugh about that, because there's not that just you can't be that wide open. You have to be very specific about who you think your customer is going to be. And in doing that, you're going to say, why are they your customer? Why am I solving their pain point with this solution? And I want to understand, what is my value to them? Am I just supporting a lifestyle? Am I creating, again, a solution to a problem that they have? Are they just seeing what I have as something that they desire and they want to build around? I mean, Apple, from the day they launched, were not always the best technology, and arguably even not the best technology today, but they have set up a customer base that desires that product at such a great level that that becomes an important decision for that customer to make. And I love the last point here, get to know them well. Like, just keep asking them and try to engage them as many times as you can authentically. I'm not a big proponent of sending surveys, because you just are going to get an answer that they think you want in order to get the next discount. So I like personal interviews. I like picking people out of your customer base and call them and ask them about your product and be willing to listen to what they're saying, even if it's not good. Because if you can start to find the problems, you can make iterations to your product or your service or your app or whatever it is that you're creating. This is why I'm a fan of these of personas and customer segmentation. What I've shown here is just one typical example of Tommy technology. But if you begin to understand, if you have multiple customers and you can define them by terms of their demographics or what their goals are in life or the common objections that they might have, what are their biggest fears? Boy, that's a great one, because biggest fears starts to really play at the root of their need to solve their problems. If you can define someone in terms that don't just relate to your particular problem or your particular solution, but really look at their world as a whole, then you can see how you become part of their ecosystem. And by understanding these personas and then adapting those personas, you can also begin to say, I know that there are 2,700,000 Tommy technologies out there that are 34-year-old uh, accountants who make 125 grand a year. You can really put a very specific financial number on that customer, and determine where they shop and whether they are going to intersect with your product in the retail location you're in, or are they going to follow your Instagram page and place orders off of Instagram? Are they going to shop at Amazon and they want to find your product there? But by using these personas and creating your ability to get out of your own agenda and infer the decisions of that customer segment along the way, you're going to have a much better example. I saw one of the most spectacular series of customer segments I'd ever seen in the innovation and discovery department at Wendy's, of all places. But the best thing they did at Wendy's is they defined their 7 personas, and each one of those personas was shown in a visualization in this lab, so that they were never that far out of a discussion. Somebody could say, well, we're going to create this new double bacon burger cheese dog. That sounds delicious. And they could say, how does that play with Tommy? How does that play with Patty? And let's understand the value to those customers. And it really takes your decision process to another level of evaluation. This idea of validation of your customers can happen and should happen at multiple points. So as you're beginning to identify a problem that you think might exist in the world, the first thing I want you to do is start talking to people. I mean, it can start with your friends, and your friends may not be your initial customer segment, but it gets you comfortable with this idea of creating personal conversations. And as you begin to ask why, you're going to find that customer segment and you're going to start finding those specific customers. And I'll tell you what, 10 times out of 10, in those personal discussions, if you find that someone already has the solution to your problem, that's actually a good thing. I have so many people who come to me with startups and they say, "Oh, I had this great idea, and then I went to the store and I found the idea." And so I no longer can compete. And I say, absolutely, what you found is a baseline. How can you build on that? How can you make that product better? And what they've done is they've validated that you're in the right spot. If they have a viable product that's selling, uh, or a viable app that's being downloaded, just because that competition is out there actually should be a positive note that they have found that validation. But the thing I don't want you to do, I'm going to refer a book here in the next couple slides, and that book is called The Right It. And one of the things that comes out of that book is collecting your own data. They call it YODA, your own data. So you can't rely on someone else interviewed somebody who said they thought they liked your product. That's not validation. You need to hear it yourself, or your product team needs to hear it yourself, and you need to collect and analyze that data towards what is a minimally viable product. And a minimally viable product model is you should create the first thing that's going to be as simple as it can be, as limited number of features as it can be to validate that you in fact have a customer. If you try to put out your first app and it has 1,000 pages of sign up, you're going to fail. You have to think about what is that minimally viable product. And of course, you have to begin to start thinking about, as you begin to get in that monetization model, what is fiscally sustainable, right? So impact should be that highest priority. And impact could be sales, it could be a change in the way of thinking, it could be creating a complete new category. But I think it's important nowadays because it's such a noisy world that you just can't be different. You have to be distinctive. So think about that. Be distinctive, not just different. And you can't have impact without a sustaining business that's making money. Even if you say, well, I want to start a nonprofit so nonprofits don't have to make money. That's a crazy idea. That's wrong, right? Nonprofits need to make money in order to create impact, in order to pay people to go serve that mission. So don't believe that by creating a nonprofit that you're going to be somehow absolved of the need to create a profitable business. And so the statement at the bottom of the slide is important. Why should I care? Look at the look on that guy's face. Boy, that's exactly the customer you want to run into. I want that tough customer. I don't, your moms are all going to love your idea, but I want that customer who says, why should I care about this solution? Why should I give you my hard-earned money? If you can prove it to him that you're going to solve his problem and you're going to create a solution that he's going to be willing to pay for, that's the customer that's going to stay with you and is going to be loyal through your product iterations. I don't want to talk much about business plan because this can be multiple hour process on its own. But I like this book, The E-Myth. So if you look it up, there's a couple links in the back of this, and also there's this company called Live Plan. I think they do a great job. Once you begin to answer those questions of why is this a problem, what's the solution, who's the customer, what's the operational model, that all should go into a living document called a business plan. Um, but it doesn't have to be 100 pages. I've had people who come to me and said, well, she said, I'm not a very good writer, so should I really create this 50-page business plan? If you have all the information you need, your business plan could be 5 pages. I don't care. The number of pages in your plan does not have any correlation to the success of your business. But you do need to be making sure that you're thinking about strategically what you're trying to do in that business itself. So I'm going to just, as I'm sort of wrapping up these last 10 minutes or so, before we get to the Q&A section, I didn't want to go deep into funding, but I think it's important to understand that there's a number of phases when you get to funding. And all of us who've watched Shark Tank, boy, you get just in love with this venture capital, this VC seed round. I got to get my seed round in order to get to my A round. I think you really should think about the various options before you talk to a venture capital firm, and I'll get to that in a second. Of course, the very first one is self-funding, and we call that bootstrapping. And I love the idea of bootstrapping because it says that you have skin in the game. You are putting your own money out, which means that you're going to be motivated to make sure that that money is going to see a return, but you're self-funding before you actually get up to that point where you're potentially going to launch. If you can create a business by bootstrapping until you're generating your own revenue, fantastic. That means that not only do you have a sustainable business that gets to revenue quickly, but you have not given up any equity or ownership in your business. And my belief is that you want to try to retain as much ownership as you can until a certain point where you can't scale. So let's say that you've bootstrapped this to the point where you might be able to get yourself to launch, but then you're going to need a little extra money because you need to get to inventory or need to do marketing for your app so that more people can see it. And then you're going to say, can I get traditional bank financing? Can I go through my bank and get a small business administration loan? Those are all just payback, no equity, non-dilutable positions. But keeping in mind that there's some steps you have to go through with that. Like you may have to put your house up. You're going to have to do some traditional some traditional bleeding before a bank's going to give you money on a startup. But again, you're not giving up any equity. Now, there is a possibility of bringing family and friend money in, and that can come through a whole different series of mechanisms that I won't get into today. But there are family and friend money. If you've got some rich aunts and uncles who want to help you, there's mechanisms that allow you to do that, that also do not necessarily give up equity in your company. Angel investors are a unique twist, and an angel investor is typically a fairly high net income individual who likes your idea, who likes a particular category. If you say, I want to start a restaurant, you're going to find some angel investor groups who just love restaurants. And they typically are going to give you much more manageable terms on the money that they either lend you or that they invest in your organization. So angel investors are a way to find someone who's interested in your idea, potentially also someone who can be a great advisor to you. So that initial advisory council you put together can be made up of those angel investors. But I think until you're really at the bottom of that slope where you have broken even, you're at a point where you want to be able to scale to grow. And that's when you want to talk to a venture capital firm, not before that, because one, as a venture capital firm, is not going to really want to talk to you until you've got a proven model that's ready to scale. At that point, you're going to likely make the decision that to make my company bigger, I'm going to need a lot more money than I can put my hands on from my angels or family and friends. And a VC firm is going to come in and seed that, or they're going to come in with an A round. And that is that's a whole nother discussion. But I want you just to keep in mind that there's a lot of other funding options before you get to that point of talking to a VC firm. And please do not let your friends say, "Oh, you got to talk to my buddy. He's a VC." You just don't need to do that. You need to figure out how to make your company profitable without giving up equity before you get romanticized into believing that the VC firm is the only way to go. I'm also not going to talk in great detail, but Andy can make this deck available to you, or you can go back once this goes up on YouTube. Um, Absolutely, as you begin to determine what the structure of your organization is going to be, you're going to talk to your accountant and they're going to help you decide if you're an LLC or an S corp or what your corporate strategy and setup is going to be. You want to make sure that you're working with a good attorney to get a confidentiality disclosure agreement or an NDA in place so that you begin to talk to people under secure conversations. I don't want to get into the concept of the value of intellectual property, like we talked about my patent portfolio of 25 or 26 ideas. There certainly are values to owning the patent, but it's again a very expensive process. Here's 3 links that you can go to find some of those agreements. You certainly are going to need insurance and talk to Andy or somebody at our hosts here, American Family Insurance, about that to be able to set that component up. but I can't stress enough that I'm not an attorney. Do not listen to me. This is only just to give you some words to be aware of. So as we wrap up, there's a couple of resources I want you to look at. I mentioned the book, The Write It, the bright yellow cover. I love that book, particularly if you're doing anything in the software. That's a fantastic book. My methodology of creating startups, and particularly creating even this conversation today, was based on the book, The Lean Startup, which I think is an absolute fantastic read. That also plays in with the Simon Sinek book called Starts with Why, which is, as you saw earlier, I use this term why quite a bit. But recently, I love Adam Grant. You can follow him on social media. He's a young guy now. He wrote this book called Think Again. And I just think, again, the power of knowing what you don't know is such an important mindset component that these are four books that I recommend. There's thousands of great startup books out there. So, feel free to just explore them. But again, I really feel like you can't go wrong reading Lean Startup and reading The Write It, because there are so many very practical concepts there to keep in mind. So I want to summarize a bit. And I think you can break your startup down, or break this discussion down into three big categories: the creation, the capture of your idea, and the delivery of the idea. So if you use this last slide as a summary, let's touch on those points again. Ask why. Why is this a problem for someone? Is this the right problem I'm solving? What is the root of that problem? Dream big enough that you can maintain your passion in an idea. Some people might say, well, I'm passionate about making money. Well, if that's the case, then just to go invest in smart stocks and make money and save yourself the hassle. But you should be passionate about solving the problem, or passionate about creating your own business. And that allows you to dream big. And you dream big by being curious. It's funny that you could talk to anyone who started a business, and chances are they have five more business ideas captured on their phones. And I hope that you do this as well. That all of us walk around looking at the world and exercising our growth mindset and saying, it's really an interesting problem. Like I was at the doctor's office last week, and I saw an advertisement for those like bracelets that you wear that say I have diabetes, or the medical alert bracelet. And I thought, well, why do they always have to look so old school and boring? Why can't we design really fairly unique and more fashion driven uh, medication bracelets? There's probably a lot of reasons for that, but that just stuck in my head, and I'm like, I'm gonna put that in my phone. I may never ever do anything with that idea. And if one of you does it, great, you can have that idea. You don't even have to give me credit. Just send me one sometime. But I think the idea of being curious allows you to exercise that curiosity part of your brain, and allows you to start thinking through what are potential business ideas, and you will maintain that for the rest of your life. We talked about the value of having a growth mindset. Allow yourself to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes, and be flexible and listen to other people's opinions and change your direction, because that that ability to adapt is what got really big companies through the pandemic. That is going to allow companies to get through the challenges that we're having with some funding coming to agencies right now. Having a growth mindset that allows you to shift and adapt is really critical. Be customer centric and love your problem, right? So if you're creating the problem, or you're creating the world, then you have to move to capture, validate, validate, validate. Done. Maybe if you do nothing more than that, go talk to as many customers as you can. I think that in that process, as you're talking to them, you have to also listen. So you can't just say, well, I'm going to go out there and tell the customers I've got this great idea and I will solve all your problems for you. No, you have to listen to what they say. And if the customer says, I hate that solution, don't just say, okay, well, thanks very much. I'm done with my call. Say, tell me about why you hate that. Let me understand that better. Have you figured out a better way to solve it? Or do you just not like me? Like, let's really understand. So both talking to them and listening to them. And of course, you'll be dead if you can't deliver. In fact, I wouldn't start a startup unless you intend to try to at least push it through to a point where you try to deliver. What is your value proposition to that customer? Uh, how can you be adaptive, and then how can you repeat? Because this is probably one of the hardest points of anybody with a startup is when your company starts to grow and you begin to generate revenue and it's all exciting. And then you have to say, well, what's next? I got to repeat this. I got to go to the next product. I have to move to the second $1 million of sales. I need to add more to my inventory. I need to create a next app. I need to find a new customer. So don't think that creating a startup is a get it to that get it to that point of launch and then you're done. It's going to repeat and it's going to continue to scale as your business gets bigger. But don't be afraid of that. Don't eat the elephant. You can eat it one bite at a time. So just learn the whole process and make sure that you're understanding the path that you're on. So with that, my discussion is done for today, and I'm hoping that Andy is going to come back and ask a bunch of awesome questions so I can help to add more specific detail to your thoughts.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is a great call to action for all of those of you who are tuning in today to go ahead and get your questions in for Paul. But we do have one for you in
Great.
regards to some of the investors. So are you saying that angel investors do not request for equity, unlike VC? Any clarification?
No,
Go ahead.
I think it really depends on what the system is. I think it's entirely possible an angel investor will ask for an equity position, but in most cases, and again, this is where you're going to have to be flexible. In some cases, the angel investor may just want to give you an 18-month loan, high interest, but an 18-month loan because they don't really want to own equity in your company. But they also may say, well, we recognize that equity is the only thing you have to give, so I want equity. And then you get to decide. You can say, is this someone as an angel investor who understands my market? Maybe, I'm going to create an insurance program and it's somebody who came from American Family Insurance and they're now retired and they become a great advisor to you as well. So this is why I like and I want to put the angel investors in there because they're different than just somebody who's got a check and wants a chunk of your company. An angel can be this great advisor who can show you the history of a particular market, and they're passionate about that particular industry as well. And the equity is really between you and that angel investor as to what they want out of the money that you want to get. The thing I caution though about with that is knowing how much money you actually need. And so if you don't create the business plan, you don't know how much money it's going to take for you to get to launch. You don't know when you're going to break even. This is one of the most important things I think you can do when you're creating that strategy is actually understand where you're going to generate money and where your expenses are going to be, even at a simple model, to know how long after you begin to generate revenue you're going to break even. Because if you say, well, I know that it's going to cost me $747,000 to launch my product and it's selling at $2 a piece, and so I'm going to need to sell 300,000 of them to break even. That's going to take me 4 years. Well, are you willing to spend 4 years of your time where you're chunking out money the entire time, and that $748,000 is going to only grow? You have to really think about and plan what my financial needs are going to be. So before you talk to that, even family or friends, or before you talk to an angel investor, and absolutely you won't even get a conversation with a VC firm unless you have that very specific pro forma projection when your break even is going to be and when they're going to get paid back. Because you want to be able to go into any sort of investor with a really clear understanding of what your costs are, what your revenue is going to be, and when you're going to break even.
Thanks for that, Paul. The next question, any ideas on actionable examples of how to discuss idea validation with customers?
Yes. So, Andy, I've been playing disc golf recently,
Mm-hmm.
and I keep visiting these other courses, but I want to tell other people like that I went to that course, and maybe they'll ask me about that. What I wonder how I could do that. What do you think about that?
Maybe some enamel pins on on your disc golf bag might be a way to showcase that.
So what you're saying is that there's a company that makes these cool enameled pins that I could put on the bag with all my disc golf discs in there. And then when I'm at a course, somebody could ask me about that, right?
Absolutely.
That's crazy. Boy, I wonder who does that. And I wonder if they've got an Instagram page that I could see some of these pins. Okay, so my facetious example is you don't have to overcomplicate it. Just ask people, you know? It's amazingly easy if you just want to get people and to give you feedback because you're not trying to sell them anything initially. You're trying to say, what do you think about that? Right? I mean, Andy, I'm going to ask you that question. You've got the founder, you've got the enamel pins now. Did you just do that because you thought it'd be cool?
That's where it is stemmed from. So just to give you some context, Paul and I have had some conversations off camera surrounding this, but yes, yeah. So it was something that I wanted something that I personally, would want to feature, and if other people along the way found that was cool, that would be great. So and was able to do that through the validation of prototyping and trying to sell them as well. So yeah.
So that was really your step is you thought this would be cool. And the first thing you did is start asking your other friends who played golf and said, what do you think? What would you think about that? And they're like, oh, I think that's pretty cool. And you placed a first order with not a whole lot of money and you sold them out in a very quick amount of time, right?
Yeah, it was
That is the best validation is get something out there for them to respond to. So I think that you can conduct very formal market research, and that's fine. But also you can just start asking people. That's a great way to find your customer too, because you may believe that your customer is this one person, when in fact your customer is somebody who's just slightly off of that, but who's more passionate. But until you start talking to people, you don't find out where those passionate followers are really going to be and where those people who are sneezers, which I would call are in nowadays terms an influencer, someone who goes out and tells everybody, man, I saw these awesome enameled pins for all the places where I play disc golf, and now I'm on a quest to collect as many as I can. Right? You have to just go talk to people. I know that that was a long explanation, but do you think that got to the original question, which is what's the practical way to validate? Go ask
Yeah,
them.
actionable examples. Yeah, I think that, and feel free
Yeah,
to chime in if you would like further clarification from Paul, or maybe we're looking for a different direction. This next question, though, is a very interesting one, Paul. So, should one plan for legacy, handing over the company to someone else from the get-go?
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I think that you can plan for that. That can be part of your business plan. I mean, there's a lot of people who just don't want to execute. One of the questions that I ask people who come to me is, do you want to run the company or do you want to sell the company? And I think you have to make that decision early on. And it doesn't mean that you are set to that. You might say, well, I want to run the company. And then one day you're like, I don't want to run a company anymore. This is really hard and it's not making as much money as it needs to, or my life has changed and I can't keep, having two jobs. Because I also am very fond of keeping your day job while you're starting your startup. It's important to have insurance and some income to, pay for a home to live in. Uh, but I think that you should declare in your mind, do I want to run a company or do I want to build this to sell it? Because some of your decisions will be different if you're deciding to sell it. I mean, you're going to have to be much more demonstrative about the differentiation of your product or identify where there might be patentable or protectable components of your business that become truly sellable assets, right? If you just had this idea for this thing, you never patented it, and then you go to sell it to somebody and they say, well, we want to own this. And you say, well, I don't own it. Well, it's entirely possible. They'll just say, fine, we'll just go ahead and develop it ourselves if you don't own it. And if you say, oh, no, but I have this patent that proves that I own it, then that becomes a sellable asset. So I do think that having at least in your mind whether I want to run the company or whether I want to sell the company is important to have early on.
awesome. Well,
And
that
also, I think it's important, Andy. There's no shame in selling your company, right? There's no
yeah.
shame in identifying like I'm a great idea person. I can create ideas and build them to a business case all day long, but I just I don't like operations. I don't like finance. I don't want to be out there, moving boxes around. Like there's no shame in that. There's
Yeah, I
also no
think
shame in closing your business down. That's a conversation we haven't got to, but I think I have a lot of founders who come to me and they say like, "Ah, this just isn't going. Like I cannot get it to gain momentum, and I'm just so disappointed and that I'm going to disappoint people if I shut it down. I'm like, who are you owing to? You and your family, right? If you shut the thing down, doesn't mean that there's no value to what you did. It just means that you made the good decision that I don't need to move forward with this because it's not a good use of money. They talk about can't throw good money after bad, right? Don't put more money into a business that's not doing well. Close it, start up a new one. You always have that ability, and you're always going to be growing from those building blocks.
Yeah, and I loved how you covered kind of like the self-aware aspect of just that, right? Like I think
Yeah.
that, when people are setting out and, towards a goal or a dream, there might be one sort of belief, set or set of values, and those ebb and flow and can change over time, right? So I think
Yeah.
it's, having a strong understanding of, what is it that you want to do? How do you want to be showing up? I think
Yeah.
is very important.
I mean, think about your own case. I mean, do you really think that your your disc golf pins are going to supplant your day job?
Yeah, probably not.
Probably not, but it can be really fun, and
Yeah.
it'll allow you to take this as a hobby and make some money as a hobby and get to do something you really enjoy and building a business. So you know, it every startup does not have to be a unicorn, it does not have to be $1 billion business. If you run the best sub restaurant in your neighborhood, that is awesome. And you
Mhm.
employ 3 or 4 people or 5 people, awesome. Do that, right?
Yeah, no, I love that. I absolutely love that. We're getting close to on time here, but Paul, one thing that we always like to ask our presenters here at DreamBank, just because we are a community that is built up of fellow fearless dreamers, what's
Yep.
one piece of advice that you have for someone who is actively pursuing a dream right now?
Make sure you're dreaming big enough. Um, because I think that there will be a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of people questioning you. And if you don't really create something that you're truly passionate about solving that problem for, then you're not going to have the motivation to keep pushing when things get tough or you get questioned about it, right? I think that there's a lot of times when you're if you haven't dreamt big enough about what and when I mean dream big, I'm not talking about, oh, I want to become the next Amazon. I'm saying even if it's just my dream is going to be big enough because I want to make education affordable to every kid in every city in the US, right? That's a big dream, right? It doesn't it's not necessarily making money at that. You're just impacting a lot of people really positively. That's a big dream that you can be passionate about. So when people begin to question you, and these are going to be people like your spouse and your parents and certainly your bank, that you can sort of stand defiantly that I have researched this. I know that this can be successful and I'm willing to keep pushing forward when all indications might be that you shouldn't. Now, you might decide at that point, okay, I'm overwhelmed by it. But if you aren't passionate about what you're doing, you're never going to be able to stand on it, you know?
Yeah, I love that. I think, Simon Sinek obviously, authored books on that, but I think
Yeah.
making sure that
Yeah.
your why is certainly strong enough to kind of help you weather the storm when you are facing, that inevitable adversity that you will encounter. So I
You
love
will. And
that.
if you don't find that adversity, you're probably not pushing far enough.
Very sound advice. Thank you. I think it's a good place to wrap from there. Paul, thanks again for offering your insights and wisdoms here on the Dream Bank stage. Thank you all for taking time out of your day to join us here. I mentioned in the chat that this event is being recorded. Recording will be shared with you to the email address in which you used to register, and then there will also be a short survey that will be sent to your inbox here at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. If you wouldn't mind just taking a few moments to fill that out, that really helps kind of steer and dictate the content that we put out for you all. So thanks again. With that being said, we will go ahead and cap it there, and we will see you all next time. Take care.
Thank you.